My family called me a loser, so I evicted them from the house I secretly owned. My brother cried, "Please don't do this." But it was too late. They had no idea what really happened until they lost everything. I'm Liam, 36, male, and at my mom's retirement barbecue, after I gave her the keys to a used car, she shrugged and said, "Your brother is still better than you, even though his gift was cheaper." My own mother, standing in the dappled sunlight of her backyard, surrounded by friends and family, reduced a lifetime of my effort into a single, cutting sentence. It wasn't the beginning of the story, but it was the end of a chapter. The chapter where I still tried. The air in my mom's backyard was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and grilling hamburgers. Cheerful, light blue balloons tied to the deck railing bobbed in the gentle June breeze. It was a perfect suburban Saturday, tailor-made for the kind of wholesome family celebration you see in commercials. My mother Brenda was officially retired after 30 years as a bank teller, and this party was meant to be the grand kickoff to her golden years. I wanted it to be perfect for her. I'd spent weeks planning my gift. Her old sedan was a rust bucket on its last legs, a constant source of anxiety for her. So I did my research. I didn't just buy a car, I found the perfect car. It was a 3-year-old certified pre-owned SUV, a cherry red model with top safety ratings, a sunroof, and less than 20,000 miles on it. It was practical, reliable, and just flashy enough to make her feel special. It was also expensive, setting me back a significant portion of my savings, but I reasoned that her peace of mind was worth every penny. She'd be able to visit her friends, go on road trips, and not have to worry about breaking down. It felt like the right thing to do, the kind of gesture a good son makes. I waited until most of the guests had arrived and my mom was holding court near the patio table, laughing with her former colleagues. My younger brother, Kevin, was hovering near her, a smug, proprietary look on his face as if he'd personally organized the sunshine. "Hey, Mom," I said, walking up with a small, gift-wrapped box. "I have something for you." A polite, slightly distracted smile touched her lips. "Oh, Liam, thank you, honey." She took the box and began to unwrap it with methodical slowness. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, were the keys to the SUV which I'd parked just down the street, adorned with a big red bow. She stared at the keys for a moment, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What's this?" "It's for you, Mom, for your retirement," I explained, my heart starting to pound with anticipation. "It's a car, a really nice, safe one. It's parked just around the corner." A few of her friends oohed and awed. "Oh, Brenda, how wonderful," one of them exclaimed. But my mother's reaction was muted. She picked up the key, turning it over in her hand as if it were a strange rock she'd found. "A car? Oh, well, that's practical." That was the first dagger. Practical, the word she used for sensible shoes and fiber supplements. Before I could say anything else, Kevin stepped forward dramatically, holding a sleek black box from a high-end designer. "My turn," he announced, beaming as if he were about to reveal a cure for all known diseases. "Happy retirement, Mom. You deserve to be spoiled." Mom's eyes lit up instantly. She eagerly tore into the wrapping paper, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a ridiculously expensive leather handbag, the kind that costs more than a month's rent and is famous only for its prominent gold logo. Her gasp was audible across the yard. "Oh, Kevin," she cried, tears welling in her eyes as she clutched the handbag to her chest. "It's beautiful, it's the one I saw in the magazine, I can't believe it." She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing with gratitude. Thank you, my wonderful boy." She turned to her friends, showing off the bag. "Look what my Kevin got me, he just has the most exquisite taste, he always knows exactly what I want." She then glanced back at the car key still sitting in its box on the table, a paperweight of my affection. She shrugged, a tiny, dismissive gesture that ripped through me. "Your brother is still better than you," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "even though his gift was cheaper." The casual cruelty of it, the public declaration, stunned me into silence. Cheaper? That handbag, while expensive, was a fraction of the cost of the car. But that wasn't the point. The point was the ranking, the explicit formal announcement of what I had known my entire life. As if on cue, Kevin, puffed up with his victory, turned to me with a sneer. He leaned in and shouted, for the benefit of anyone who might have missed the initial verdict, "It must be hard to be a loser who no one loves." The chatter around us died down. A few people looked away, embarrassed. My mother didn't scold him, she just beamed, stroking the leather of her new purse. In that moment, something inside me didn't break, but rather clicked into place. It was the cool, calm click of a low CK, sealing a door that I had been trying to hold open for 36 years. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the quiet, serene smile of a man who had finally been set free. "You know what, you're right," I said, my voice even. "Enjoy the party, Mom." I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I walked calmly through the gate, down the street to the shiny red SUV with the stupid bow on it, got in and drove away without a single look back. This wasn't an isolated incident. My entire life was a collection of similar, smaller moments that all pointed to the same conclusion. I remembered being 10 at the school science fair. I had spent a month building a working model of a volcano that erupted with baking soda and vinegar, complete with a tiny, terrified plastic village at its base. I'd won a second-place ribbon. Kevin, who was 6, had scribbled a rainbow with crayons on a piece of construction paper. My blue ribbon was put in a keepsake box in the attic. His drawing was ceremoniously hung on the refrigerator, where it stayed until it yellowed and tore 6 months later. When I was 17, I saved up for a year from my grocery bagging job to buy my first car, a rusty but functional 1988 sedan. My parents complained constantly that it dripped oil on their pristine driveway. 2 years later, when Kevin got his license, they co-signed a loan for a brand new sports coupe for him. He wrapped it around a telephone pole 3 months later, and they spent weeks comforting him about his trauma while complaining about the insurance premiums. The pattern continued into adulthood. I graduated from university with honors in computer science. My parents came to the ceremony but left before my name was even called to beat the traffic. When Kevin dropped out of community college after one semester to find his passion, they threw him a party to celebrate his courageous new journey. Every achievement of mine was a footnote. Every failure of his was a heroic struggle. Driving away from that barbecue, the quiet hum of the engine was the only sound. The red bow on the hood fluttered in the wind, a ridiculous symbol of a hope I now realized had been foolish. I wasn't just driving away from a party. I was driving away from a lifetime of being second best, of being the practical son, the reliable backup, the one who was never enough. And as the miles stretched between me and that house, I wasn't sad, I was calm. Because for the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. The smile stayed on my face for the first 5 miles, a brittle mask I didn't have the energy to take off. The windows of the SUV were down and the warm air rushed in, carrying the scent of summer, of other people's barbecues, of honeysuckle, of freedom. I was on autopilot, my hands steady on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, my eyes focused on the road ahead. But my mind was a whirlwind, replaying the scene in the backyard on a tight, painful loop. My mother's shrug, Kevin's sneer, the word loser. It wasn't anger that filled the hollow space in my chest. It was a profound, echoing emptiness. It was the quiet grief for a relationship I had desperately wanted but never truly had. All my life I had operated on a simple, if flawed, premise. If I were successful enough, responsible enough, and generous enough, my value would become undeniable. I thought love and respect were things you could earn, like a promotion or a good credit score. I'd built a successful career as a software engineer, managed my finances meticulously, and always been there when they needed something. A leaky faucet fixed, a computer virus removed, a quiet loan to cover a sudden bill. I thought these actions would accumulate like points in a celestial video game until one day a notification would pop up. Congratulations, you have unlocked parental approval. Instead, all my achievements had been dismissed, and my grandest gesture of love was treated like an unwanted appliance. It finally dawned on me that I wasn't playing a game I could win. I was playing a game designed to make me lose. My role in the family was fixed. I was the sensible, boring, reliable foundation upon which my mother and the golden child, Kevin, could build their dramatic, exciting lives. I was the foundation they never looked at but always expected to be there. As I took the exit onto the highway, my thoughts drifted back a decade. I was 26, just 2 years into my first real job at a tech startup. The pay was good, and for the first time in my life, I had a substantial amount of money in the bank. I remember getting a frantic call from my mom. Her voice was thin with panic. My dad, a proud man who had worked in construction his whole life, had been laid off after an injury, and his pride had kept him from telling anyone how bad their financial situation had become. They were months behind on their mortgage. The bank was foreclosing. I drove to their house that weekend and saw the official notice taped to their front door. The shame and fear rolling off them was a physical force in the room. My dad wouldn't make eye contact with me, staring at his worn hands while my mom wept silently in the kitchen. They were going to lose their home, the one they'd lived in for 30 years, the one where I'd built my volcano and Kevin had scribbled his rainbows. Kevin, who was 22 at the time, was useless. He offered vague platitudes like, "We'll figure something out," before asking if he could borrow $20 for gas. The burden, as always, fell to me. That night I couldn't sleep. The thought of them homeless and humiliated was unbearable, so I came up with a plan, a crazy, drastic, and anonymous plan. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in real estate and corporate law. Following his guidance, I formed a shell corporation, a nameless, faceless, limited liability company I called Bayside Holdings. Through this LLC, using the money I had been saving for a down payment on my own place, I bought their mortgage from the bank. The bank was more than happy to sell a distressed asset for a slight loss. To my parents, it was a miracle. My lawyer, acting as a representative of Bayside Holdings, sent them a letter explaining that their mortgage had been acquired by a private investment firm that was offering them a new, much more affordable payment plan. The payments were about a third of the original mortgage. They were ecstatic. My mom called me crying with relief. You won't believe it, Liam. Some angel investor bought our loan. The new bank manager is so kind. He said he saw our good record and wanted to help. I never told them the truth. My dad's pride was too fragile, and my mom, well, I think I was afraid she'd find a way to resent me for it. It was easier to let them believe in a benevolent stranger than to accept help from the son they perpetually undervalued. For 10 years, they'd been making their small mortgage payments not to a bank but directly into a business account that I controlled. It was, in essence, a heavily subsidized rent that was far below market value. I never touched the money. I just let it accumulate, figuring one day I'd sign the house over to them completely. The irony was crushing. As I drove the car I'd bought for her, a car she didn't want, I thought about the house I'd bought for her, a house she didn't know I owned. The gift she dismissed was a pale shadow of the gift she had unknowingly accepted for a decade, and in return for that silent, immense act of love, I was called a loser. The hollow sadness inside me began to change. It was like watching water in a tray slowly freeze, the molecules shifting, aligning, and hardening into something solid. Ice. The endless, desperate desire for their affection, the hope that I could somehow fix our broken dynamic, it all froze over. I was done being their secret benefactor. I was done being their emotional punching bag. I was done being the foundation they stood on while looking down on me. The house wasn't a gift anymore. It was a chain. It was the last, heaviest chain binding me to them, forcing me to absorb their toxicity in silence. Breaking it would be catastrophic for them, but for me, it would be freedom. I saw a sign for a rest stop ahead. I pulled off the highway, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I parked the car, the engine ticking as it cooled. I sat there for a long time, the silence broken only by my own ragged breathing. Then I took out my phone. My fingers were trembling, but my resolve was firm. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, Mr. Davison, my lawyer. I pressed the call button. He picked up on the third ring. Liam, it's a bit late on a Saturday. Is everything all right? I took a deep breath, the cold, hard certainty solidifying in my chest. Hello, Mr. Davison, I said, my voice steady and clear. I need to make an appointment. I've decided to dissolve Bayside Holdings. I want to sell the property. On Monday morning, I was sitting in a plush leather chair opposite Mr. Davison's sprawling mahogany desk. His office on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper was the epitome of calm professionalism. The thick carpet absorbed all sound, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a silent, sprawling testament to order and consequence. It was the perfect place to begin the systematic dismantling of my own life. Mr. Davison was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a mind as sharp as a shard of glass. He had been my counsel for 10 years, the only other person on the planet who knew the truth about my family's home. He listened patiently as I recounted the events of the barbecue, my voice devoid of emotion as I laid out the facts. The car, the handbag, the words. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He didn't offer condolences or platitudes. He was a lawyer, Yield in actions and repercussions. I see, he said, his gaze steady. And you're certain about this course of action? As I've advised you in the past, your ownership of the property via the LLC is legally ironclad. The tenancy agreement they've been operating under is effectively a month-to-month lease. You are well within your rights to terminate it with a 60-day notice. But Liam, he paused, his professional mask slipping for just a moment to reveal the man beneath. Are you prepared for the emotional fallout? There is no going back from this. I'm aware, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. The emotional fallout has been happening my entire life. This is just the financial part. I'm ready for it to be over. He nodded slowly, accepting my answer. Very well. He swiveled in his chair and turned to his computer. The process is straightforward. We will draft a formal notice of termination of tenancy. It will state that the property owner, Bayside Holdings LLC, is terminating their lease and they have 60 days to vacate the premises. We will have it delivered by a registered process server to ensure they receive it and cannot claim otherwise. He continued, his voice all business now. Concurrently, I will engage a real estate agent I trust. We'll get the property appraised and listed as quickly as possible. Given the current market, it should sell quickly. Are you in agreement? Yes, I said. The word felt small in the quiet room, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. Mr. Davison printed out a few documents authorizing him to act on my behalf. As I signed my name on the lines, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. It was like stepping out of a plane, that terrifying moment between the safety of the cabin and the snap of the parachute opening. Each stroke of the pen was a cut, severing a tie that had long since become toxic. It's done, he said, taking the papers from me. I'll have the notice drawn up this afternoon. Expect the process server to deliver it by Wednesday at the latest. I would advise you to prepare yourself. I thanked him and left the office, walking out into the bright sunshine feeling lighter than I had in years. The next 2 months, the period stipulated in the title of my life story, passed in a haze of quiet anticipation. I followed my lawyer's advice and blocked Brenda's and Kevin's numbers on my phone. I didn't want to be swayed by a sudden, tearful phone call or enraged by a string of abusive texts before the legal process was formally underway. I needed a clean break, a firewall between my old life and my new one. All communication, I decided, would have to go through Mr. Davison. I threw myself into my work, coding for 10 to 12 hours a day, finding solace in the clean logic and predictable outcomes of programming. If a line of code was wrong, you fixed it and the program worked. There was no favoritism, no emotional manipulation, just cause and effect. I reconnected with friends I'd let drift away, had dinner with them, and went on weekend hikes. I started dating a woman named Sarah, a kind and intelligent architect I'd met through a mutual friend. I didn't tell her the whole story at first, only that I was going through a difficult family situation. She didn't press. She just listened, offering a comforting presence that felt more like family than anything I'd ever known. I was building a new life, brick by brick, while the legal machinery I'd set in motion worked silently in the background to demolish the old one. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized was possible, the quiet hum of a life lived for oneself. It was the calm before the storm, and I spent that time reinforcing my own foundations, preparing for the hurricane I knew was coming. The email from Mr. Davison arrived on a Wednesday afternoon exactly as he'd predicted. The subject line was simple: notice served. The body of the email was just as succinct: Liam, for your records, the tenants at 123 Maple Drive were served with the notice of termination of tenancy at 2:15 p.m. today. The 60-day clock has started. Let me know if you have any questions. I stared at the screen, picturing it. A stranger, a professional process server, walking up the familiar flagstone path, knocking on the green door I'd painted with my dad one summer. I imagined my mother opening it, her brow furrowed in annoyance at the interruption to her afternoon soap opera. I saw her taking the envelope, the confusion turning to disbelief as she read the cold, legalistic language. Bayside Holdings LLC termination of tenancy must vacate within 60 days. The hurricane made landfall less than an hour later. My phone, which had been blissfully silent for weeks, began to vibrate incessantly. Though I had blocked their main numbers, they were resourceful. The first salvo came via email from my mother. Her initial message was pure, baffled rage. Subject: what is this? Liam, I just received some ridiculous legal papers. This has to be a mistake. It's some nonsense about Bayside Holdings. You need to call them and fix this immediately. This is not funny. I read the email and deleted it without replying. Minutes later, another one arrived. Her tone had already shifted to one of accusation. Subject: answer me. This is because of the barbecue, isn't it? You're doing this to punish me because I liked Kevin's gift more. I cannot believe how petty and cruel you are. After everything I've done for you, you call your mother and you apologize right now. I deleted that one too. Then came the texts from unknown numbers I assumed were burner apps or friends' phones. This was Kevin. His messages were a torrent of pure, unadulterated fury. What did you do? You're throwing our mother out on the street, our 65-year-old retired mother. You are a monster, a sick, twisted monster. I'm calling a lawyer. I'm going to sue you for everything you have. You won't get away with this. You are dead to me. The irony of him, a perpetually broke junior investment advisor threatening to sue me, a software engineer with considerable assets, was not lost on me. I read the messages with a strange sense of detachment, as if I were a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. The rage, the accusations, the melodrama, it was all exactly what I had expected. It was a confirmation that I had made the right choice. Their panic wasn't about losing a son or a brother. It was about losing a roof over their heads. A week later, the next phase began. Mr. Davison's real estate agent had moved quickly. On a Saturday, I found myself inexplicably drawn to my old neighborhood. I parked a block away and walked, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs, and there it was. Planted firmly in the center of the lawn I used to mow was a bright red for sale sign. Seeing it was surreal. It was the home of my childhood, the backdrop to every memory, good and bad. I felt a pang of nostalgia, a ghost of sadness for the family that could have been. But that feeling was quickly eclipsed by an overwhelming sense of relief. The sign wasn't just a piece of plastic and metal, it was a declaration of independence. It was proof that the chain was truly being broken. The sight of the sign must have triggered a new level of panic for them because the nature of the communication shifted again. The anger began to curdle into something else. The storm wasn't passing, it was changing, morphing from a hurricane of rage into a typhoon of desperate manipulation. The begging was about to begin. The first voicemail arrived a day after the for sale sign went up. The angry, accusatory tone was gone, replaced by a soft, trembling voice I barely recognized as my mother's. It was her performance voice, the one she used when she wanted to generate maximum sympathy. Liam, honey, it's your mother, she began, her words punctuated by small hitching breaths. I saw the sign in the yard. Liam, there's been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. I think we just need to talk, clear the air. Why don't we have a family reunion, just us three? We can have a nice dinner and we can sort all of this out. Please, honey, I miss you so much, I love you. I listened to the message, my hand resting on the phone. The words family reunion echoed in my mind. It sounded so reasonable, so forgiving, but I knew what it really was. It was a summons, a negotiation tactic. The reunion would be a courtroom where I was the defendant and the expected outcome was my unconditional surrender. She wasn't begging for her son, she was begging for her house. I deleted the voicemail. She left another one the next day and the day after that. Each one was more desperate than the last, filled with dramatic sighs and theatrical tears. I'm not sleeping, Liam. I can't eat, you're breaking your mother's heart. Kevin's tactics shifted as well, from white-hot rage to a desperate, pleading tone that was even more jarring. This was the part from the title, the line that would be etched into my memory forever. Please don't do this. His texts became long, rambling paragraphs. Please, man, just stop, call it off. Mom is a wreck, she's crying all the time. Is this what you wanted, to completely destroy her? Think about her health, she's 65. The stress is going to kill her. Do you want that on your conscience? We're family, you don't do this to family. What will people think? What will Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim say? You're making us look like fools. He was trying every angle he could think of: guilt, fear, social pressure. But every message only reinforced the core truth. Their concern was entirely for themselves. Not once did either of them say, I'm sorry for how we treated you. Not once did they ask, how are you feeling? It was all about their comfort, their reputation, their impending homelessness. The financial reality must have been crashing down on them with the fork. E of a tidal wave. Kevin, the junior investment advisor, would have quickly discovered that with my mom's meager retirement savings and his own mountain of debt, they couldn't afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment in their current town, let alone buy a new house. The comfortable, subsidized life they had taken for granted was evaporating before their eyes, and his panic was palpable in every character he typed. Throughout this onslaught, Sarah was my anchor. I finally told her the whole story one evening as we sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below. I told her about the favoritism, the barbecue, and the 10-year secret of the house. She listened without interruption, her expression a mixture of shock and empathy. When I was finished, she simply reached out and took my hand. Wow, she said softly. Liam, I'm so sorry you went through all of that for so long. I just feel like a monster sometimes, I admitted, the guilt a persistent, nagging voice in the back of my head. I'm putting my own mother out of her home. No, she said firmly, squeezing my hand. You are removing yourself from an abusive situation. You gave them a home for 10 years, you gave your mother a car, you gave and they took and they took. This isn't you being a monster. This is you finally standing up for yourself. You are not the loser who no one loves, Liam. You have me, you have your friends. You've built a good life for yourself and you deserve to enjoy it in peace. Her words were a balm on a wound I didn't realize was still so raw. She was right. I wasn't alone and I wasn't unloved. I had a chosen family, one built on mutual respect and genuine affection. Fortified by her support, I held my ground. I continued to ignore the calls and texts, letting Mr. Davison handle the few necessary communications regarding real estate showings. The desperation from my mother and brother escalated until, inevitably, they decided that if I wouldn't come to them, they would come to me. The final confrontation was no longer a possibility. It was an inevitability. The ambush happened on a Tuesday. I was leaving my office building, heading to my car in the parking garage when I saw them. They were standing by my parking spot, a two-person barricade of desperation and fury. My mother was leaning against a concrete pillar, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Kevin stood beside her, his arms crossed, his face a thunderous mask of resentment. My first instinct was to turn around and walk away, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. This had to happen. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward them. Liam, my mother cried as I approached, rushing forward to try and grab my arm. I sidestepped her instinctively. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice cold and even. We had to see you, she sobbed, the tears now flowing freely. You won't answer our calls, you won't listen. Liam, please, we can fix this, just take the house off the market. We can have that family reunion, just like I said. We can go back to how things were. Go back to how things were. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Go back to me being the silent, reliable wallet. Go back to me being the family disappointment. Go back to them holding all the power. No, I said, the single word cutting through her performance. We can't go back, and I'm not taking the house off the market. Why are you doing this to us? Kevin spat, stepping forward. What did we ever do to you that was so bad you had to destroy our lives? I laughed. It wasn't a sound of mirth. It was a dry, hollow, incredulous sound. What did you do? I repeated, looking from his furious face to my mother's tear-streaked one. For the first time, I wasn't going to hold back. They wanted a confrontation, they were about to get one. Let's start with the barbecue, I began, my voice dangerously quiet. Let's start with me spending $30,000 on a safe, reliable car to make my mother's retirement easier, and her shrugging it off like it was nothing. Let's start with her loudly announcing that you, I said, pointing a finger at Kevin, are the better son right before you screamed at me that I was a loser nobody loves. Should we start there? Kevin flinched, but my mother rushed to his defense. It was a party, things were said, you're too sensitive, you're punishing us for a few words. A few words, I said, my voice rising. This has been my entire life, but you're right, this isn't about the barbecue, this isn't about the car. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. This is about the house. What about the house? Kevin sneered. Dad and Mom worked their whole lives for that house. No, they didn't, I said, looking directly at my mother, whose eyes widened in confusion. They were about to lose it. Do you remember, Mom, 10 years ago, when Dad was laid off and the bank was foreclosing? Do you remember they? Notice on the door. She paled, her hand flying to her mouth. The nice man from the bank, he helped us. There was no nice man from the bank, I said, delivering the final blow. There was me. I was 26 years old. I had just started making good money and I took my entire life savings and I bought your mortgage from the bank. I created a shell company, Bayside Holdings, so Dad's pride wouldn't be hurt. For 10 years, you haven't been paying a mortgage. You've been paying me a fraction of what it would cost to rent that house and you never even knew it. I saved you. I gave you a home for a decade and I never said a word. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so profound I could hear the distant hum of the garage ventilation system. Kevin stared at me, his mouth hanging open, his face a comical mask of disbelief. My mother looked like she had been struck by lightning. The color drained from her face and she stumbled back against the pillar for support. You're lying, Kevin whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. He was looking at our mother and her expression was one of dawning, catastrophic horror. She knew it was true. The miracle loan, the ridiculously low payments, the anonymous investment firm, it all clicked into place. I pressed on, my voice hard with the righteousness of a decade of silent sacrifice. I gave you a home. I tried to give you a car. I have given you my time, my money, and my entire life's effort trying to earn a scrap of the love you hand over to him for free. And in return, I got called a failure and a loser, so I'm done. I took a step toward my car, pulling my keys from my pocket. The house has an offer on it, I said, not looking at them. The closing is in 2 weeks. Mr. Davison, my lawyer, will be in touch. I've instructed him to cut you a check from the proceeds of the sale. It should be enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a small apartment somewhere. It's more than you deserve. I finally turned to face them one last time. They were broken. All the fight, the entitlement, the arrogance, it had all shattered, leaving behind two stunned, pathetic figures in a cold, concrete parking garage. This was never a negotiation, I said softly. This is a consequence. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing peace. Goodbye. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving them and the entire wreckage of my old life behind me in the rearview mirror. 2 years passed, 2 years of quiet, uninterrupted peace. The kind of peace that settles deep in your bones, warming you from the inside out. The sale of the house went through without another word from them. My lawyer handled everything. A significant check was sent to my mother, and then a profound and welcome silence fell over my life. My relationship with Sarah blossomed in that silence. We moved in together, building a home filled with laughter, respect, and the easy comfort of two people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. We adopted a goofy golden retriever and spent our weekends on hiking trails, not intense backyards filled with unspoken resentments. I was promoted at work, leading a team of engineers on a project I was passionate about. My life was full. I was happy. I was the furthest thing from a loser imaginable. I rarely thought of Brenda and Kevin. When I did, it was with a distant, clinical sadness, like remembering a sad movie I'd once seen. The sharp edges of the pain had been worn smooth by time and distance. I did hear about them once through a distant aunt who called me for my birthday. She was hesitant, unsure if she should say anything, but her gossipy nature won out. She told me that Brenda and Kevin had ended up in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a town an hour away, the only place they could afford. Brenda, stripped of her home and social standing, was miserable. She had lost the stage for her performances. Kevin's life had imploded even more spectacularly. His flashy, confident persona was built on a foundation of lies and his parents' subsidized home. Without that, he crumbled. Word got around his firm about his family's financial catastrophe. It turned out the junior investment advisor couldn't manage his own money, let alone his clients'. He was let go. The last my aunt had heard, he was working a retail job at a big box store. The smug sneer wiped from his face for good, replaced by the weary resignation of a man forced to confront his own mediocrity. Hearing it didn't bring me joy, There was no triumphant feeling of revenge, there was just a quiet, somber sense of justice. It was the natural, unavoidable outcome of their own actions. They had built their world on my back, and when I stood up, their world collapsed. One evening, about a year after the confrontation, I received one final email. It was from my mother. The subject line was just my name. Liam, I understand now, I hope you're happy. I stared at the too short sentence. As I understand now, did she understand the years of hurt, the deep emotional neglect, or did she just understand that her comfortable life was gone and the person responsible for it was me? I suspected it was the latter. I hope you're happy. It wasn't a genuine wish for my happiness. It was a final, subtle barb, an attempt to inflict one last pang of guilt. 2 years ago, it might have worked. But now, I read the email, took a deep breath, and dragged it to the trash folder without a second thought. There was nothing left to say. There was no path back, no reunion that could ever fix what was so fundamentally broken. My forgiveness was not something they were entitled to, and my peace was something I had earned. I closed my laptop and went into the living room, where Sarah was on the floor roughhousing with our dog. The sound of her laughter filled the space, chasing away the last of the ghosts. She looked up at me and smiled, a genuine, uncomplicated smile that asked for nothing and offered everything. This was my family. This was my home, not a building of wood and nails, but a life built on a foundation of real love. And so I have a question for all of you watching. Is cutting off toxic family the ultimate act of self-preservation, or is there always a path to forgiveness? I made my choice, and while it was the hardest thing I've ever done, it was also the thing that saved me. What would you have done in my shoes?